For today's video, we are looking at section 9.4, which is about histograms. And the video is a little bit different than how we normally do. A lot of the graphs are pre-drawn in your book, and so it just made sense for us to take a look at them and kind of point out things that are important to include in your notes. So first things first, you'll want to definitely include the title, that it's 9.4, and that these are histograms. And now looking at the graph that they have here on the book, it looks a lot like a bar graph. And so we need to talk about what makes a histogram different from a bar graph. And so it tells us here that histograms also group data into classes, kind of like our stem and leaf plot from the previous lesson, but they use vertical bars to represent each class. The height of each vertical bar represents the frequency for that class. So for example, this is called the height of 8th graders. And so we can see on the side, these are the number of students. Down here at the bottom, here is the height in inches. And they're kind of classified, not specifically like how many were one specific height, but how many students fell between the height of 60 inches to 62 inches. How many were between 62 and 64, 64 and 66, and so on, okay? And so then the height of the bar in the histogram tells you how many fell into that category. Now, I don't know how many were 61 or how many were 60. I just know that there's 4 students that fall in the category of between 60 up to 62, okay? But not including 62, because 62 would be in this group, 62 and 63. And the next group would be 64 and 65, and so on, okay? So let's take a look at the example questions here about this graph. And it says, answer the questions about the above histogram, heights of 8th graders. How many students are between the height of 68 and 70 inches tall? So we'd go to 68 and 70, and we'd see that you can go all the way up here and see that it's between 6 and 8, which would be 7 students. How many students are greater than 60 inches tall? So we would go and take a look, greater than 66 inches. So we'd say all the way to here at 66. So if we're in this category, we could be 66 or greater. So we have to add the value of the 3 bars to the right of 66. So here's 66 right here. And then we've got 1, 2, 3 bars that include 66 and higher. So there was a total of 19 students that are 66 inches tall or greater. Does the histogram show how many students are exactly 64? And that would be no, because it's, you've got a category of students in that group. Let's see. It says how many students were surveyed. Well, to find that out, you would count the total for each column or each category. So you do 4 plus 6 plus 11 plus 9 plus 7, and it's kind of hard to see, but I think that last one is 3. And they have a total of 40 students surveyed. And then what percent of 8th grade students are between 60 and 62 inches tall? So you would go, how many are between 60 and 62? Well, we got 4. And it would be 4 out of the total of 40 students. So that's how they got the 4 over the 40. And they reduced that down and got 10%. So 10% of the students are between the height of 60 and 62 inches. Okay, let's look at the next part. Okay, the next example we have, example 9.4b, and it says that Stephen has kept accurate records of basketball scores for teams in his conference during the year. Construct a histogram of the scores he recorded. So the first list of numbers here is just the raw data that he collected. So the first thing we want to do is to rank the data, put it in order from least to greatest. So you can see they put 22 all the way up to 76. Now we're going to put them in groups, kind of like we did for the stem and leaf plot, like how many are in the 20s, how many are 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So now we know the height of each bar of the histogram. And then now we're going to take a look and says to identify the range for each class, and then we'll label the horizontal axis. So when they say range, we mean the highest and the lowest. So you'll take the highest number, which was 76, and subtract the lowest, which was 22, and get a range of 54. So given each class a range of 10 will result in 6 bars. So it lets us know we're going to have 6 sections, which kind of tells us from our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we'll list that down here. And then because we can see that the highest one we have is 8, that we don't need to go much more than 8. This graph went ahead and made it up to 10. And then now it says you're going to, fill in your histogram based on the data you have in your little chart here. So for the 20s, there are 2. For the 30s, there was 1, and so forth. Okay. When you draw this, if you draw it freehand, of course, you must give it a title. You want to label the axes. And then also notice that the histogram does not have any space between the bars. So visually, when I look at this, I know it's a histogram because there's no spaces in between the bars, because it's a range of data and there's no gaps. We've got 20s to 30 filled, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. There shouldn't be any open spaces. Okay. All right. We'll talk more about this in class.